Welcome back to the second part of this mini-series going over the speedruns of Deltarune chapters 1 and 2. Last time I covered all of chapter 1 and I recommend watching that video first if you haven't already because I explained some basics in there that would be relevant to today's topic, chapter 2's main route. The Snowgrave route will be in the third and final video since I feel it's different enough to warrant its own segment. Out of the 32 categories for this game, chapter 2 and by extension all chapters take up 14 of those spots each. They are Main Route, which requires beating the game without having Snowgrave to Burdley, Snowgrave, which requires completing the entire alternate route, All Recruits, which requires beating the main route while also having recruited all 10 times of Darkness shown in the recruits menu, so not including people like Hacker. I will not talk about this category too much, since the only thing the recruits give you is more HP for the Giga Queen fight. You essentially just spare enemies on the way while doing the normal route, and all bosses, which requires also defeating Spamton Neo in the main route. All of these have 4 subcategories: Glitched, no major glitches, Glitchless, and 1.09. Note that all recruits and all bosses 1.09 were moved to the category extensions though, since the routes are kind of similar to their glitched counterparts. I will not cover most glitchless strats in this video since this is going to be focused on the interesting glitches and skips that speedrunners use rather than route as a whole. With all that out of the way, I hope you're ready to have your mind blown even more than last time, whether you're already a fellow runner or not. This time, choosing between English and Japanese depends on the category. In Glitchless, it's faster to play in English all the way through because Queen has a different, longer speaking quirk in Japanese, and this one cutscene negates all the other time save from unskippable text. Also, the Agree to All puzzle in the Cyber field is ever so slightly faster to complete in English. In no major glitches and other categories where you go to the Cyber City, it's faster to start in English for the previously mentioned time save, then switch to Japanese mid-run for the rest of the unskippable text. This is of course also doable in Glitchless, but it ends up being slower since you never reload anyway. In Glitch, Japanese is used all the way through. All in all, these language strats only save about 2 seconds each, so not nearly as much as the 13 from chapter 1. There's another thing we have to do before starting the chapter. In chapter 2 only categories that fight Giga Queen specifically, we need to do RNG manipulation to ensure we get the best trash machine for fighting her. The head for the trash machine is decided the moment you open chapter 2 from the chapter select screen. On versions before 1.13, it's required to open the chapter, change RNG using the legend cutscene by skipping it at very specific points and back out to force the game to give us the flame head, the fastest option. But in version 1.13 and onwards, the default head, that is to say the head the game chooses from a fresh boot, became the flame head, and it rendered this manipulation unnecessary. The reason why this happens in newer versions is unknown. It's not intentionally programmed like that, but I guess it just worked out. Nowadays, only runs of the chapter 2 all bosses 1.09 category and runs done on console require the old RNG manip, since the consoles were never updated beyond 1.06, which is 1.10 on PC. You can opt into versions 1.15 or 1.19, also known as LTS v3, through Steam betas if you don't want to bother with that. Again, we have completion data so we can skip to the Dark World immediately. Fun fact, this was not actually possible to do until the release of version 1.07. Immediately, we're going to start off with the most common glitch in chapter 2, wrong warps. I explained what they are last time, so here's how to actually pull them off. You need to have the menu and sprint buttons, that's Ctrl or C and Shift or X respectively, held down, and then on the first frame you enter a screen transition, hold the opposite direction. If you regain the ability to move while the screen fades out, you did it properly. Fun fact, you didn't need to have menu and sprint held down until version 1.06 where the developers added this requirement in order to patch out wrong warps accidentally performed by casual players, but to keep them in game for speedrunners. Thank you Toby and Co. There is a catch though, you can't always perform them. There is this thing we dubbed wrong warp state, and you can only wrong warp if it's active, and there are 3 main ways to get it: loading a save file, watching a cutscene that changes rooms, and most importantly wrong warping into a room. If you don't wrong warp to a screen transition, you can't do a wrong warp again until you regain this state. These factors lead into what is known as wrong warp chaining, where we keep wrong warp state throughout many rooms in order to skip something or to save some time. So we will be abusing this a lot throughout non-glitchless runs. Here's the first cutscene, and here's something important that I want to talk about. As I mentioned last time, the Automasher progresses text at 15 text boxes per second, and you can't mash on top of it in chapter 2. But if you are really quick, you can stop holding the auto masher, hold extra shift and mash Z and enter yourself rhythmically to potentially go higher than that, up to 30. This is appropriately called manual mashing, and there are very mixed opinions on this. Some people like it, some people don't, some people got injured by doing it too much because of the repetitive hand straining. It does save around 10 to 15 seconds on the longest categories when done optimally, but it's not recommended going for unless you really want something like a world record. As for the wear wires, there's 3 main ways to do this fight. Fight wire, which is to just fight with Chris and Susie for 3 turns. This is the easiest but slowest strat. Taddy Wire, another strat named after Taddy Man, which is to spare the top enemy and fight the bottom one. You do jiggle jiggle top, fight bottom, then jiggle jiggle spare the top wire, and then beat up the remaining one. And Throw Wire, which requires using the act with the same name to throw Chris at the wires to spare both of the enemies. This is the fastest, but is also RNG dependent, since the wires can spawn in such ways where you can't hit them. It's also the required stats for all recruits, since you don't want to fight any recruitable enemies. After this, in the non-glitched categories, we take off Chris and Ralsei's armor. We will be selling it to buy equipment. You don't need to in glitched, since you don't gain access to shops until far later. Just dodge the bullets on this big slide. Alternatively, since the falling bars are tied to the music, you can hold the game window until the sequence ends and it also works. Unlike in the chapter 1 slide, getting hit here does not lose time. However, there are some categories where having high HP is important. You might have noticed in the chapter 1 video that the music in most Runner's games was modified. You are allowed to change the OGG music files found in the games folder with 2 exceptions. A Cyber's World and Pandora Palace have ties to the gameplay itself, so you are not allowed to change those because you might gain an unfair advantage. A Cyber's World is tied to these falling bars, and Pandora Palace is tied to the fire cycles of these paintings in Queen's Mansion. There is more music like dial tone that is synced with the phone ringing in the background, and it's pronounced rules, which is synced with rules saying, but those don't actually affect runs, so they're fine to modify. This cutscene also removes wrong warp state. There's nothing special up until you meet Queen at a punch-out minigame. This is not super interesting, you just dodge. You can buffer your inputs, as in hitting the arrow keys slightly before hitting the ground so they're processed as early as possible to dodge faster, but these are small optimizations. There is one thing here: if you punch Queen as she goes down, you get an extra hit in and save about a second. The window is somewhat tight, but it's not terrible. Bosom is faster. This is very important. The next room is where the routes for glitched, no major glitches, and glitchless separate. In glitchless, go and get 6 bagels from KK for even more money that we'll need soon, not needed in all recruits. Go right through these bars and this Viro Virokun if you don't need to recruit it. Complete Agree to All or Yes to O and go up to Sweet Captain Cakes. In no major glitches though, you can instead save at this save point, reload to regain wrong warp state, warp once, grab the bagels, and warp down to end up at the exit of the Sweet Cap'n Cakes battle, where you can enter and start the fight immediately, saving about a minute. In glitched, however, supposed to be fast. It's graceless, that's really the only goal. Doesn't really matter how you accomplish it, I guess. You can do a strat called Door Overflow to teleport you all the way to the mansion or the trash zone in all bosses, more on that soon. This cutscene where get 400 bagels from KK works in mysterious ways. As you see here, if you clear this text immediately, you have to wait a second before you can move, so you can kind of abuse this. If you keep the last text box of the cutscene open, you won't have to wait before regaining movement after closing it. This allows you to interact with the door frame before the cutscene technically ends, which means that when the cutscene ends and gives you movement back, you will have a text box open while walking around. That is frame perfect. Having movement with the text box open allows for many funny things, but if you then interact with KK again to get his tracers queued up but not actually on screen yet, interact with the door and progress more text, the tracers that were queued are now replaced with the door's fast travel options. If you even slightly mess it up, Noelle will crash your game. We dub this Noel anti-cheat. In main route and all recruits, we choose to go to the mansion because it's the furthest in and skipping there saves about 20 minutes. This is the biggest glitch in terms of time save in both Undertale and Deltarune so far, and is what pushed the community to distinguish between glitched and no major glitches categories. This is the only glitch that is not allowed in NMG. In all bosses glitched, we want to take the door to the trash zone, saving 4-ish minutes. This is because we have to fight and spare regular Spamton to unlock Neo, so unfortunately we do have to go through the entire Cyber City. And yes, before you ask, we do skip the first Birdly battle. There were heated discussions about this when Door Overflow was discovered, but ultimately the consensus is that all bosses requires defeating the main villain and the secret boss. We'll come back to those areas later though when the routes converge. For now, the Sweet Cap'n Cakes fight. The strat here is to use Dance X on anyone but Sweet, and this will make it so Chris is always targeted on odd numbered turns. This mechanic was added by the developers in 1.08 to help speedrunners, so thank you Toby and Co. We want Chris to die here so the fight immediately progresses to the end where Susie and Ralsei learn how to act. Now that we unlocked SNR action, we use them to end the fight.
We back.
Here in this cutscene, Chris stays dead. This was also added by the developers in 1.0.5 and it's really funny. Oh, good bit, man. That's unfortunate. Most broken chapter. At the end, if you enter the fight from below, the party will be invisible and no end scene will play, but you can just hold down right and you'll get out of the room. Now, as you go down, you can go back in two ways. The safest way is to just go down the slide and around like usual. The second way is to perform a chain of these 4 wrong warps. This is called Snowy Fields and saves about 12 seconds. However, if you miss the second or third one, you will just softlock because the force field is still up. Here's what we needed the money for. At Sweet Cap'n Cake shop, sell everything you got and buy Mecha Saber and Auto Axe. Here, just go past these enemies if you're not doing all recruits. If you're really quick, you can go above this last one and save about a second because you don't have to wait for it to pass. This is called SCS or Smorgasbord Cycle Skip. In the next room, try to go up and around the first Vero and guide the arrow he shoots all the way to the key. This is a bit precise, but if you get it you save more or less 3 seconds over waiting for the second Vero to shoot, and it's called Fast Key. Go up and make sure to get all 70 arrows to obtain the Rager 2, which is equipped immediately along with both other weapons. For the Birdly battle, we want to fight with everyone twice, and then defend Rootbuster Pacify on the third turn to end it as fast as possible. If you miss one Suzy crit or more than one Chris or Ralsei crit, you can't end the battle on turn 3 and you will lose a turn, so the requirements are kind of tight. Entering the trash zone, we are given the wrong warp state unless we enter to the fast travel door. You can use it to wrong warp here, your choices don't matter by the way, and here to save about 6 seconds worth of walking. Get Noel and proceed forward. Here we can do mouse 1 skip or M1S for short. Push this block to the very edge, interact with it and get on the button at the exact same time. What happens here is you lose your movement from getting on the button, but then after the block goes into position you regain your movement. So you can walk out of the room even though Chris looks like they're staying in one spot, saving about 6 seconds over doing the puzzle normally. If you miss it you can just go forward and tell Noel to proceed, losing you 14 seconds over doing the skip. The action of interacting and moving on the same frame is called an interact slide. Telling you now because similar strats will come up again later. Here do take care and spare. We can grab the pink ribbon which loses a few seconds but is safer because of the bigger grazing box around our soul. Continuing forward, there's nothing really special. Getting past these cars quickly looks pretty cool though. Here, there's a few ways to skip these enemies. The safest way is to go all the way around the Ferris wheel poster to avoid them. Another way is to wait a bit above the poster and then go under them. This strat is called Morbulance. Thanks, Shay. Where you go between Viro Kun and Ambulance. There's also this strat that's next to impossible, but it looks funny. I don't even want to try to begin attempting this. Here, step on the switch and make sure you don't stay on it, otherwise the 1 second timer needed to trigger this animation doesn't go down. Now we wait. Now we save and reload to perform mouse 3 skip, M3S for short. This is a chain of 5 wrong warps. This reload is also where you switch from English to Japanese, as mentioned at the start of the video. Go up and hug this wall to dodge the wear wire if you don't need it for all recruits. Hit these switches to stop the cars. Here we can do another glitch. It doesn't really have a commonly approved name, but I call it Fast Mouse 2. After getting the blocks in the right place, if you position Noelle in such a way that she gets hit by the mice while they're released, you regain control during Noelle's dialogue, so you can bring out the mice again and have Noelle hit by them as early as possible. This saves like 2 to 3 seconds. Doing the cheese maze quickly is super satisfying. And here is mouse 3 skip itself. The final wrong warp puts you after the puzzle, which is where the save point is. This saves roughly a minute. For the Birdly fight, we want to play smart to increase Noelle's magic, then fight Ice Shock 3 times. Alternatively, if you have the Mecha Saber, you can play smart twice and fight Ice Shock twice for a small time save of less than a second, but you do have to hit both critical hits. Now we wait. Fun fact, you can hold left and right here and the cars will not fly away. The baby car in Castletown shows up if you hit less than 3 cars here, so this is a safe way of making sure that doesn't happen. Most runners pile these cars up and dispose of them at the very end. We do a bit of vehicular manslaughter around here. It doesn't even save time, it's literally just for the love of the game. Anyway, for Spamton, we can do a cool strat aptly called Spamton Skip. This was actually the very first skip discovered for Chapter 2, so worthy in fact that it was discovered before the Snowgrave route itself. We do an interact slide on this poster, which allows us to keep movement during the cutscene and just go out of the room. Again, it looks like Chris stays in the same spot, but you can still move. However, before we go forward, there is a difference here in all bosses. Since, as I mentioned before, you need to actually fight Spamton for all bosses, instead of Spamton Skip, you do a slight variation of it called ABHS or All Bosses Hell Strat, where you do the following. Interact slide with the poster and go all the way right. You know you got there when the camera stops moving. I will use a mod to show the hitboxes so you can see what's going on. Wait for the fight to start, but before it does, use the cell phone and clear the text while you're inside of the fight. Now you have movement in battle. Complete the fight as normal by dealing 5 times and open your menu while Spamton is attacking so you don't move in the overworld. As soon as the fight is over and Spamton is counted as spared by the game's flags, which is when the "You won" text appears, hold up to go out of the room. This saves having to watch the end cutscene and also makes the second part of Spamton Skip possible, which is that you absolutely must not hit this switch. If you do, you're soft locked. Instead, what you wanna do is go out of bounds and go around the traffic into the next room. Spamton Skip saves a minute and a half and ABHS saves roughly 20 seconds. Noelle's trauma is unskippable. Here we give the gift to Noelle and tell Susie that she's afraid. For these ambulances we do get hit, defend, get hit, and then spare. And yes, doing the avoid act instead does work but is considered too risky by most runners. The time difference is negligible. Hold right and tank the damage from the fireworks. Sometimes you can get lucky and have them not hit you at all. Fight the mice here normally, or recruit with either Catch X or the SNR actions if needed. Nothing can be done to speed these minigames up here, just don't be stupid like I was. Or that can also happen. Oh, I haven't done that in a while. Okay, so if it wasn't obvious by now, this run is actually dead. Well, there is one thing. You can build up speed before finishing the 20 mice minigame and you will keep it after the cutscene is over. Once we are captured, we want to menu to key items and whip out Lancer. We don't want to menu anywhere else. This cutscene also gives you wrong warp state, so you can do an entire chain here throughout the mansion if you want. It saves barely any time and is pretty difficult, so most people don't bother. The first puzzle is pretty easy and you can't do anything to speed it up. But before the second puzzle, there is a strat you can do called MIS, which stands for Mansion Interact Slide. As the name suggests, you do an interact slide here to somehow interact with the sign at the same time as starting the cutscene. But seriously though, why can you do this from so far away? Anyway, the idea here is to mash the first bit of text to regain movement, then do the puzzle while the cutscene is progressing and then mash the rest afterwards. If you clear the text too soon, the skip is essentially cancelled and you have to sit through this scene. This also means you can regain movement while doing the puzzle, but this is just funny and doesn't really help. MIS saves around 7 to 8 seconds. The third puzzle has like a myriad of ways to complete it. Fun fact, the game only checks if the square is entirely filled, so you can do some bullshit like this and it still works. Here, Bradley can pick one of 5 words: prodigy, which is changed to wise in Japanese, smart, clever, genius, and intelligent. One extra letter loses about half a second, so this is essentially RNG time loss. Fun fact, there was supposed to be a 6th word, quick or brain, but it ends up being unused because the random number generation doesn't account for it. Also, there's a strat here where you keep Bradley's text up and only mash it away as the RNG word is fading out, and it skips the December word entirely. This only works on every other frame, so it has a 50-50 chance of working. Fun fact, this was discovered by Wonder J because they were watching Pirate Software, who accidentally did it in his casual playthrough.
She got nervous and couldn't speak. She lost.
This saves 8 seconds. Get Ralsei. At this point is where the all bosses route starts being different. For all bosses, go to the trash zone, which loses 1 group state, and go to Spamton shop to buy the keygen and some frayed bow ties for future fights. Go back to the mansion and head forward, tanking the damage from the paintings. Avoid the pot. Here there are 2, technically 3 ways to go past. The safest way is to start the pot balancing minigame, then head up and out of the room, then go back in. This will despawn the swatchlings. Next is pot balance, where you do the minigame as intended, but drop the pot near the end so the victory cutscene doesn't trigger and go through, saving about 6 seconds. Next is pot balance again, but a few frames faster. While running, instead of dropping the pot, you can do an interact slide on the swatchling at the same time as triggering the victory cutscene, which looks pretty cool. Let's go. Do Task Manager's quiz and spare her immediately. We're gonna take another break from main route here, because this is where all bosses is the most different. Head right and stop the cars by hitting these switches. You can hug this left wall to make the cars in this lane not spawn. This is because the spawn trigger wasn't extended far enough. Unlock the paths in your way and enter the basement. Here we will save and reload to start the most hated wrong group chain in the game, the basement works. We will do a series of wrong groups to the entire area, starting with going left towards the teacups. Reach the end of the room, go back right until you see that the path has disappeared, and go back left to see. You can equip stuff on Chris or call Gaster or do whatever while waiting for the teacups to come up. Hit the switch. Don't have a skill issue. It's just that simple. Wrong up until you reach the Neo body and get the empty disc. Wrong up until you leave the basement. Here is something hilarious. Because of the wrong up putting Chris where this door is, the camera isn't where it's supposed to be, and the cutscene also pans it left so you can see some objects that are normally hidden. One of them is the object that controls the keygen force field appearing, and the other is Frozen Birdly, which is the object used to indicate if the room should be in its snow graveyard state or not. Unfortunately, in the latest update of the game, 1.19, Birdly was made invisible. I understand why they did it though, because in this room, Birdly can just barely be seen at the top, so I assume they did it for that reason and not because they looked at speedruns. I hope. Anyway, go back to the trash zone to load Spamton into the disc. Go back to the basement and you can save and reload again to do wrong groups towards the Neo body to save just a few more seconds. For Spamton Neo, the strat is to spare him, just like Jevil. This fight is much simpler. You just spam snap all when you can, and if Chris is down, use SNR action. Remember that in all bosses glitched, you never unlock those, so you need Chris to be able to act. Remember that in this fight, as well as regular Spamton, you have one opportunity to heal with F1. In these attacks, we just graze as much as possible. In the Pipis cannon and heart attacks, we use the big shot exploit done by holding Z and spamming enter or vice versa to get rid of them as fast as possible. This is phone hands grazing, which is really difficult but so satisfying. This attack is actually different depending on if Spamton is enraged by the big shot exploit or not. This is what the normal attack looks like. After the battle is over, we want to equip the Dealmaker to Susie and the Freight Bowties to the other two. This cutscene also gives wrong up state, so you can immediately wrong up out and continue the chain throughout the entire mansion. Oh, also, because you're put in the default point of this room, which is above the entrance of the basement, and the cutscene moves the characters left, you will be moved out of bounds and you have to wrong up either from the side or from below, which is pretty funny. Alright, here's where the differences in all bosses stop, at least until the final battles. Go up this teacup. You can tap left or right 4 times and you will be in a safe spot where you cannot get hit. In this room, the key is going to end up one position clockwise from where it started. The best possible scenario is for it to end up at the top since you're already going up, then the left, then the right. Because of the janky ass hitboxes, you can't actually just hold right and interact with this one, you have to go up and around. If you haven't been continuing the wrong up chain from before, you can interact with this painting to unlock the path for after mouse wheel. Speaking of which, the strat for this fight is to do catch X until it's at 100% Percy. This is complete RNG, so you just want to make the most of what you have. Optimally, the fight will end in 2 turns, but 3 turns is about 15 seconds, so it's still fine even if really annoying. Small thing here, if you have character actions unlocked and mouse wheel is at 90 or more mercy, you can do spare S action, R action. The actions give 5 mercy each and you can spare it without having task manager showing up, saving a little bit of time. If you wrong up out of this room, you'll be put at the bottom, so that's why you don't have to unlock the path beforehand if you have wrong up state. Go up to this room and interact with the door to spawn the platters. Immediately interact with them 3 times to make Queen reset them. Then go to the bottom to find the one with the annoying dog. You have to hit exactly 40 platters to find the key, and the fastest strat to do so is to position yourself in such a way where you can hit 2 or 3 platters at the same time. Then continue towards the left side until you're done. Doing this perfectly is really difficult and even I struggle with it, but here's a clip of how optimal movement looks like. Here, if you have wrong warp state, you can do the final wrong warp, ending the entire mansion wrong warp chain. By wrong warping into the glow shadow room, you'll be put on the other side, so you can just walk out. Be very careful when doing this though, because if you get hit by a swashling during the fade out, you will softlock. This happened to me during an event a few months ago and I will never live it down.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
If not, you can go through the room by either dodging the swatchlings or interacting with them to despawn them. Fun fact, this used to be considered a glitch, because, well, it was, until patch 1.08, which gave them a funny animation instead of just disappearing into thin air. And since it's now a feature, it was removed from the banned glitches rule set in the glitchless categories. If you want to play it even safer, you can go through the glow shard room normally. You can hold left through this room to dodge the fire, most of the time. Sometimes you can't and I don't know why. I once lost a no-hit run to this and got really upset.
Wait, what's that? Wait, hang on.
What?
What? Actually, what?
That's not supposed to hit you.
What?
Go up and enter the acid lake. Going near the houses and changing their colors is important because it will give you more TP in the upcoming rules card fight. Here, just try to go as fast as possible. Since the paths are really tight, it's hard to go through without bumping, but with a lot of practice it's possible to do it in really fancy ways. Here the strat is 2 mouse 1 mouse. That makes absolutely no sense, so what it actually means is to hit the second house, then release the mice, then also hit the first house and release the mice. For rules, we want to place 3 houses in a diagonal like this. Depending on the pattern he places his houses in, you can end the fight in 2 or 3 turns. I will leave a video by Vintagix in the info card on the top right that goes over every rules pattern and how to counter them. Make sure to graze a bunch so you have enough to do 4 houses on the following turns. Being evil to Ralsei saves time. Meet the lesbian skip, an essential Deltarune speedrunning strat. Literally just hold right and say no. For the Werewere wire, you can either wait until it passes and enter the Wells room and go back out to despawn it, or wing it and try to go behind it. Here, just tank the damage from these things. The Queen fight. This is the most complicated fight in the whole entire game thus far. Not necessarily because of its difficulty, but because it requires math. That's right, mathematics. Let me take a second to explain how the fight works first. Queen has 3 acid shields she can put up. They show up at 75, 50 and 25% HP respectively. The idea here is to do attacks that are first weak enough to leave her above 75% HP, then do strong attacks to put her below half HP to trigger the second shield, then end the fight by going straight to 0 without triggering any other shield. There is a guide made by Jack and Poncini to do this, which I will leave in the description, and the fight varies a lot depending on your equipment. Most categories have the fight optimally end in 5 turns and others 7. But the problem is, if you miss menu at all, miss 1 too many crits or hit 1 too many crits, you will have to do calculations on the fly to try to back it up successfully. For example, if you trigger the third shield, you lose like 3 turns and go through the ultimate attack, so you lose about 30 seconds. It can be really punishing. I'm not gonna go through every single category, so I'll just give you a general idea for the 5-turn battles. First, for all 5-turn variations, we start with Fight Fight Defend to put her HP barely above the first shield threshold, and then Fight Root Buster Fight to trigger the second one. Here, on the first turn of any shield appearing, you can do a trick called Free Red, where you menu to the bottom act within 8 frames and cast Red Buster without needing to have 60 TP. This happens because the game hasn't changed the act from Throw to Red Buster yet. We then use a Ralsei solo hit to break the shield. Next, we do an attack combination to barely put her above 25%, usually in the 28 to 30 range, and then end the fight with a Red Buster fight or defend. Notably, unlike King, even if the Red Buster enough is alone to finish off Queen, the Ralsei solo will still go through, so you'll have to calculate whether or not you can defend. The unnecessary hit only loses about 2 to 3 seconds. This is very important. If you finish the fight with Chris dead, heal using the save point. For some reason, this fight is the only one in the game that does not heal you when it ends, so if you start Giga Queen like this, it will be buggy and you won't be able to attack.
He's pretty far, or at least like daily, so.
What the fuck?
I'm
Ash!
at least like 126 lyrics.
Yeah, that's good.
Ash!
So, one of these runs has gotta be it.
Let's go.
What, did he get hit?
Nope, Giga Queen glitch.
We dub that bug Giga Queen Glitch. Finally, the Giga Queen fight itself. Immediately after the most painful fight of the game comes the most nerve-wracking part. This is because you have to go through all of it without getting hit. If you do, your attacks won't deal as much damage. There are a billion ways to do this fight, but I'll go over the newest and most interesting way. There is a guide with strats labbed out for every equipment variant made by Poncini, which I will also leave in the description. Round 1 is simple, we just fight 3 times. You can just dodge her attacks by going left or right, but it's recommended to go right because it's easier to graze. Or you can do return grazes, where you time a long left press and dodge as optimally as possible, which saves about 4 frames every time. I struggle with this, I don't know how other runners do it, but it's a thing. When it's your turn to punch, you can either punch 3 times back to back, or do something called delayed punches, where you punch twice, wait until she's out of her stun animation and punch again, which saves about 0.2 seconds each time. You can also do this with 2 punches, where you punch once, wait and punch again, which saves about 0.6 seconds of a normal 3 punch. Finally, it's also possible with a single punch, where after you dodge, wait until she's into position and punch only once. This saves about 0.8 seconds of her normal 3 punch, but is the least used since you're probably not going to deal enough damage with this. For round 2, we want to hit the baseballs and punch her as soon as possible, which for some reason makes it so that we can only get 2 hits in. If you wait a bit, you can get 4 hits in, but that's unnecessary for us. Then we do fire mode, which immediately calls itself flame mode when you use it for some reason. For these attacks you can also punch 3 times, but punching twice is faster by about half a second since she has no stun animation and is only possible in some categories where you are able to do enough damage. You can also do delayed punches here, but these ones are close to, if not frame perfect. Here, when she does the double kick, you can either dodge both of them and then punch, or you can do double kick skip, DKS for short, where you dodge the first kick and punch before she does the second one so you can cancel it. This saves close to a second, but the timing is really precise. Finally, we fight and start round 3. Here you will see 2 sets of queens because of the no-hit. She also gets an ominous aura around her. After we dodge these, you can punch 3 times, or if you hit as early as possible, you have the opportunity to hit either 4 or 6 times. No one really knows the timing for this, but it seems frame perfect. Then we do fire mode, and finally the most interesting part. If you do self-fix or turbo dodge here for a final attack, wait a bit and then punch, you will skip the attack entirely. Not a single soul on this green earth knows why. It is the weirdest thing about this boss. This is also possible on some other attacks, but it doesn't really help us specifically. Alright, when you hit the final baseball, you can consider the run essentially complete. There's only like a humble 8 minutes of cutscenes left. Most people use this opportunity to take a bathroom break or something. Just like chapter 1, make a beeline for Grace's house in the light world. You're not actually required to go to Castletown even if Susie says so. Here in the bathroom you can do something called sink mashing. As soon as you say yes to wash your hands, smash your keyboard. Any key counts, it does not matter. Just don't press Alt and F4 at the same time, or stop your recording. That has happened to people before. This will make Chris freak out and fall down faster. Every frame where a key is pressed is a time save of 1 frame. Apart from that, there's nothing special in this sequence. Time ends when the text inside of Toriel's last text box disappears. And that about covers the Deltarune Chapter 2 main route, all bosses and all recruit speedruns. But there's some extra funny stuff, because of course there is. Firstly, version 1.09, which I covered last time, also has some uses in Chapter 2, which are more significant in terms of time save. There are 3 spots in which this version is useful, one of which is only used for Snowgrave, so I won't cover it today. The first one is taking damage to these teacups, so you're 1 hit away from death, and then dying to the paintings after Mouse Wheel. Because that encounter creates an autosave when you're done, and that room is not considered valid, you will be put 1 room forward, which for some strange reason is the hallway with the swatchlings. This means you don't have to go through the entire platter sequence, and you save almost a minute. You also gain wrong grab state, so you can do this wrong grab here. And the room in which you fight Giga Queen is also not considered valid, so you can just die to her, select retire or give up, and you are put in the version of the room that plays out after the fight, saving you about a minute and a half. Remember how I said earlier that 1.09 Chapter 2 All Bosses is the only category that still does RNG manipulation for Flamehead? Well, this is because you're not allowed to skip Giga Queen because the category rules require defeating her, which is really funny. That is why it was moved to category extensions, since the only difference between 1.09 and the other versions is the platter room skip. 1.09 All Recruits was also moved after a community vote to try and declutter the main boards. Secondly, I want to show you a couple of niche strats and backups. First, a backup for mouse 1 skip that is a whopping 1 single second faster than going forward normally, but has the benefit of giving you the wrong grip state. So let's say you miss M1S. Release the wrist protector, go back up and interact slide upwards with the bell. You will trigger some text and regain movement from the puzzle resetting. If you do it first try, now we'll have 2 text boxes, so press Z once to progress to the second one. Then go below this block, and while holding up, interact with it. If you do this while you're below the right half of the block, you will softlock because of this invisible wall. But if you do it towards the left side, you will be able to move with text open and also be out of bounds. Now you can go left, down and around to head out of the room. While the screen transition is happening, you can clear the text in order to get wrong grab state. Make sure you don't hold up while clearing the text though, because you will trigger Noel's dialogue again and softlock. Now, here's a funny backup for missing this wrong row from mouse 3 skip. You can rub the cheese down like a beloved pet and die to the mice. This will put you over here and you don't have to reload your file and go all the way back, saving about 15 seconds over doing so. I don't know where else to put this part, but I really wanted to share this because it's funny. If you manual mash quickly enough, the game gets a bit confused in a couple spots. In this cutscene, the exclamation mark bubble stays on screen for a bit too long. And in this part before the rules fight, the screen remains darkened until you leave the room. Finally, here's a strat that nobody goes for seriously because it's stupid. After this cutscene plays out, you can frame perfectly open your menu and call caster as quickly as possible, then get hit by the paintings to regain movement with the cell phone text active. When the entry 17 sound is over, you can frame perfectly walk into the next room and gain wrong grip state. These are called cell warps and they're super stupid not only because the setup requires 2 frame perfect reaction based inputs, but also because they only save 2.5 seconds in main route glitch if you get every wrong warp until the glow shard room perfectly, which means messing these up at all negates the time save and then some. And with that, I've covered everything for today. I hope you enjoyed this video and are looking forward to the third and final part, which will cover everything Snowgrave related. If you liked it, please like the video and I'm open to any feedback in the comments. Once again, I will leave the speedrun.com page and the community Discord server in the description. Subscribe and look at my other socials if you feel like it. Thank you for watching this video and I'll see you one final time with more really cool and weird strats.